Welcome to the deep dives, where we take a stack of fascinating sources
Yeah,
and we boil them down to
absolutely.
their most intriguing essence.
Love it.
So today, we are diving into some excerpts from Osho's lectures on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
we're not going to get bogged down in every philosophical detail here.
Right.
We want to give you a taste of these ancient teachings with
Yeah.
Osho's unique spin on them.
Yeah, it's a fascinating blend, really.
It is.
You've got the time-tested wisdom of Patanjali,
Mm-hmm.
and then Osho's interpretations that add this whole other layer of insight.
I like that.
It's like seeing a classic painting through a brand new lens.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So to set the stage, I pulled a few lines from these lectures that really piques my curiosity.
Okay.
One that jumped out was Grace of the Divine Lord. Sounds pretty powerful, right?
It does.
Then there's this one. There, the consciousness is full of intuitive knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you wonder what that state of consciousness actually feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, and this one. Manifestation, dynamism, inertia is the nature of one's consciousness.
Deep stuff.
Deep stuff. And finally, this one gave me pause. The entire creation being made up of 5 elements gives you pleasure and relief from the objects of enjoyment.
Wow.
What did you make of these experts?
You definitely picked out some intriguing nuggets.
Yeah.
To give you a bit of context, the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali centuries ago are essentially a practical guide to achieving yoga,
Okay.
which means union or oneness.
Right.
And each of the phrases you mentioned points towards that ultimate goal.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit. What about this grace of the divine Lord? That
Oh.
sounds kind of mystical.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But within the Yoga Sutras, it's not necessarily about a specific deity.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that there's a force greater than ourselves that can support us on our journey of self-discovery.
So like a guiding principle or even just the interconnectedness of everything.
Exactly. Now, that phrase about consciousness being full of intuitive knowledge hints at the wisdom we all possess deep down.
Right.
Patanjali suggests that by stilling the mind, we can tap into that intuitive knowing.
Which makes sense because when we're constantly bombarded with information and distractions, it's hard to hear that inner voice.
Precisely.
Right.
Now, you also mentioned the phrase about manifestation, dynamism, inertia.
Yes.
This points to the ever-changing nature of our consciousness, which is constantly in flux like a flowing river.
And I'm guessing understanding this is key to finding some peace within ourselves.
You got it. Now, you also highlighted the phrase about finding pleasure and relief from the 5 elements.
Mm-hmm.
This is where Patanjali gets really practical.
Okay.
He's not saying we should reject the material world.
Right.
It's more about finding a healthy balance.
So enjoying that delicious meal or beautiful sunset, but not becoming overly attached to those things.
Exactly. It's about finding joy in the present moment without letting those desires control us.
That's a really important distinction.
It is.
Is like appreciating those things without letting them become the sole source of our happiness.
Precisely. Now, what's fascinating is how Osho takes these ancient teachings and makes them relevant to our modern lives.
Right. He was all about bridging that gap between ancient wisdom and the modern world.
He was.
And one of the things I love about Osho is how he uses stories and analogies to illustrate these sometimes complex concepts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the story about the child who wears out his shoes so fast his friends are amazed.
Right. That one really struck me.
Yeah.
Such a simple story, but it speaks volumes about this idea of prana or life force.
Exactly. And children are naturally so full of this energy, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're constantly moving, exploring, creating. Their prana just flows so freely.
It's like they haven't yet learned to suppress that natural exuberance. Do you remember feeling that kind of boundless energy as a kid?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
But as adults, we often get bogged down with responsibilities, routines, and that inner critic telling us to calm down or act our
Yeah.
age.
It's true. Somewhere along the line, we start to lose touch with that innate energy.
We do.
So how do we get back to that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's something Patanjali addresses in the Yoga Sutras.
Okay.
But it's not just about striking yoga poses on a mat, though, that can help.
Right. It's about rediscovering that inner spark, that sense of aliveness that we might have lost touch with.
Exactly. And this leads us to another insightful example from Osho's commentary.
Okay.
He compares our waking life to a dream.
Which is a pretty mind-blowing concept when you really think about it, because how much of what we perceive as reality is actually just a construct of our own minds?
It makes you question everything, doesn't it? Osho suggests that we're often so caught up in our thoughts, desires, and fears that we're not truly experiencing life in its fullness. We're just going through the motions, reacting to the illusions we create in our minds.
It's like we're on autopilot. And it's not until we become aware of that pattern
Yeah.
that we can start to break free from it.
Exactly. And that awareness is key to experiencing true freedom and fulfillment.
Right.
And speaking of illusions, you mentioned that intriguing story about the father asking his son to break down a banyan seed.
Yes.
That story really resonated with me because it so beautifully illustrates the concept of shunyata,
Yes.
which translates to emptiness.
Right. And it's not just about a physical seed. It's about the potential that exists within that seeming emptiness.
And how even something as tiny as a banyan seed has the potential to grow into this massive, magnificent tree.
Okay, so we've touched upon some pretty profound ideas here. We've got the grace of the divine intuitive knowledge, the nature of consciousness, finding pleasure without attachment, prana, living life as a dream, and the potential within emptiness.
Right.
How do we even begin to apply these concepts to our everyday lives?
Well, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we'll explore as we dive deeper into this episode.
So where does the rubber meet the road with all this ancient wisdom?
Right.
Let's start with that childlike energy we talked about.
Okay.
It's not about literally wearing out shoes faster,
Yeah.
but recapturing that zest for life.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, expert?
It's about approaching our days with a sense of curiosity and playfulness.
Okay.
Like, what if instead of dreading that work project, we looked for ways to make it more engaging,
Yeah.
even fun?
Right.
Or in our relationships, how can we bring back a bit of that initial spark, that sense of discovery?
It's about shifting our perspective, isn't it?
It is.
Because that same energy is still within us.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to tap into it.
Exactly. It's like we've just forgotten how to access it.
Right.
Now, remember that mind-bending idea of our waking life being like a dream.
Yes.
How do we wake up from the illusions we create in our own minds?
It starts with becoming aware, right?
It does.
Like noticing when we're getting caught up in anxieties about the future or dwelling on past mistakes.
Awareness is key. It's about hitting the pause button on that constant mental chatter
Right.
and just observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay.
The more we can do that, the more we create space between ourselves and those thoughts.
So it's not about trying to suppress those thoughts or feelings,
Right.
but rather just acknowledging them and letting them pass through without getting swept away by them.
Exactly. It's like watching clouds drift by.
Okay.
They're there, but we don't have to grab onto them and let them carry us away.
Right.
Now think about that banyan seed.
Yes.
It's tiny, seemingly insignificant,
Mm.
but it contains the potential for something truly magnificent.
And we have that same potential within us. But it often takes recognizing that inner emptiness,
Yeah.
that shunyata, to unlock it.
Precisely. Because it's from that place of emptiness, of infinite possibility,
Okay.
that true creativity and growth can emerge.
Okay, so how do we actually cultivate that inner emptiness, that
Yeah.
sense of shunyata
Yeah.
in our daily lives? Is it through meditation, mindfulness practices?
Those practices can definitely be helpful.
Okay.
But it's also about finding moments of stillness throughout our day.
Okay.
It could be as simple as taking a few conscious breaths before responding to a stressful email,
Yeah.
or really being present with loved ones instead of constantly checking our phones.
So it's about creating space for that stillness to arise,
Yes.
both in our formal practices and in the midst of our everyday lives.
Exactly. It's amazing how even small moments of presence can create a ripple effect throughout our entire being.
Wow.
And ultimately, that's what these teachings are all about.
Yeah.
They're not just abstract concepts to be pondered.
Right.
They're tools for living a richer, more meaningful life.
So it's about taking these ancient principles and making them relevant to our modern lives,
Yeah.
our modern challenges.
Yeah, precisely. And that's what Osho did so brilliantly.
You did?
He took these teachings out of the monasteries and ashrams and made them accessible to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He reminded us that spirituality isn't separate from life.
Right.
It's about how we live our lives every single day.
And that brings us to Osho's powerful reminder that truth cannot be taught.
Yeah.
It has to be learned.
Right.
So how can our listeners apply this principle to their own journeys of self-discovery,
Yeah.
to really embody these teachings?
That's the key question, isn't it?
It is.
It's about going beyond the intellectual understanding and having our own direct experiences.
Okay.
It's about experimenting with these practices, these ways of being, and seeing what resonates with us, what
Mhm.
feels true in our own hearts.
It's about approaching this journey with a sense of curiosity and openness.
Yep.
Just like that child, eagerly exploring the world around them.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's not about passively accepting someone else's truth,
Right?
but rather embarking on our own inner explorations
Yeah.
to discover what rings true for us.
Exactly. It's like we've been given a map,
Okay.
but we have to actually go on the journey ourselves
Right.
to truly understand the terrain.
And like any good journey, it's not always going to be easy or comfortable.
Yeah.
We might encounter obstacles, get lost along the way,
Right.
or have to retrace our steps.
That's part of the process. It's in those moments of challenge that we often learn the most about ourselves.
Yeah.
But the key is to keep going, to not give up on the journey.
Because ultimately, the destination is not a fixed point,
Right.
but rather the unfolding of who we truly are.
Beautifully said. It's about embracing the journey with all its twists and turns and trusting that it's leading us exactly where we need to be.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
A huge thank you to you, expert, for taking us on this deep dive
You're welcome.
into the heart of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras
Yeah.
with Osho's illuminating perspective.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration.
Thanks for having me.
Remember, the real learning begins when you take these insights and apply them to your own life, your own unique path.
Right.
So keep diving deep, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep listening to that inner wisdom that already resides within you.
Yes.
Until next time.